Hi everyone, my name's Emma. I'm a second year medical student studying online in Sydney, Australia, and this is how I got here, my journey to med school. So since it's that time of year where people back home are receiving their offers, congratulations to all of you. Applications are opening, people are writing admissions tests, all of those things. I thought it's about time that I share my journey and how I got here to med school, and yeah, maybe answer some commonly asked questions along the way. It's going to be a bit of a long one, so I want to just get right into it. So I started my undergrad in a Bachelor of Science, Biological Sciences, Life Science specialization at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, or as I know it, UOIT, which is now OzTREKK in September of 2013. I was heavily involved throughout my entire undergraduate experience, which I can make a whole other video about if you want to know. I was in club societies and I also worked multiple jobs throughout the entire degree. So I was very, very busy for those 4 years. So we'll just fast forward to the summer between my third and fourth year, which is when I started studying for the MCAT. I used the Princeton review books and worked my way through them. They were a birthday present for a very nerdy third year. And I worked full-time while I was doing that. Would I recommend writing it between your third and fourth year? I think it works. You have, if you're following sort of the Canadian system, you have all of the knowledge you should have if you take a biology degree at the end of your second year to write the MCAT. But, you know, I was a year older, a year wiser. I knew myself and my testing weaknesses that much better by the time I was done my third year, so it didn't hurt. It also meant that my 2 years of having that same score and not having to write the MCAT again unless I wanted to would last for a year until after graduation. So it worked for me. Would I recommend working full-time while you're studying for the MCAT? I had to, so I don't really have experience doing anything else. It definitely was a very long summer, but it worked, and it eventually got me to med school. So I wrote my MCAT on September 10th, 2016. I believe I had originally scheduled it for the end of August, but then I did end up bumping it back. So yes, that was after the first week of classes and the first week of orientation, which I was heavily involved in. Would I recommend that? It also meant that I had to submit my applications without actually seeing my score, which was definitely a little nerve-wracking. I had been pacing on the practice tests all right and enough to meet minimums, so I was pretty sure that if I could maintain that score, at least those applications wouldn't be a complete waste. And on the 1st of October 2016, I submitted my OMSAS, or my Ontario Medical School application, to McMaster, Northern, Queens, Ottawa. I think that was it. And was I confident? I think I knew that I was sitting in that special category of students that if I just got an interview, I could get in, but were my scores competitive? Probably not, clearly, by the results, but they weren't so low that they were, you know, a lost cause, or at least I didn't think so, but I also didn't have that much research. I didn't have that much support going into it, so maybe I flushed a few $100s down the drain, and I just like to not think about it. So later that month, I wrote the Casper, which actually was kind of fun. Aside from the stress of if my internet cut out or anything like that, I kind of liked answering the questions, and I'm a pretty quick typist, so I found that fairly okay. And then my fourth year just continued until January of 2017, which was just the month of rejections, which continued to roll into February. So I was rejected from every school that I applied to. I did not receive any invitations for interview, not even in a second round kind of invitation. At some point between February and March, I was using an email that I don't have access to. I applied for my Master's of Public Health, which was something I think just in a last-ditch effort to have some sort of meaning and something to do after my degree with my degree. I need to do something with my life panic, but it all panned out, so I don't regret it. I definitely recommend having more of an idea going into third and fourth year of what you may want to do and start researching those before. the very end of your 4th year, but I made do. During this time, I also started researching other options for med school. So I knew that I could do the Masters of Public Health for a year if I got in. I didn't even have the required bachelor's, so that was a bit of a stretch. And I would have a year to sort of gather myself and decide if I wanted to reapply in Ontario or go straight to the US, Ireland, Caribbean, UK, other options. And I started researching them, and this is when I made my first contact with OzTREKK. So if you end up watching this, hi Courtney. She was my first sort of voice at OzTREKK when I submitted an application for more information to apply to graduate entry med school in Australia. And in May of 2017, that is when I started my first application to Australian medical schools, and I applied to, or was thinking of applying to Monash, UCID, Melbourne, UWA, Griffith, UQ. In June of 2017, I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Life Science, yay, and I actually walked the faculty flag down the procession, so that was really cool. Kind of a cool way to summarize all of my involvement with the faculty, and it was a really special moment. And in August of 2017, I took back any of my applications and sort of said to OzTREKK that you can just wait, I'm not going to be applying this year, and I assume that's because that is when I got into my Masters of Public Health. I don't have that date exactly. I do remember it being very last minute, so that does kind of line up. At another point over the summer, I decided that I might as well try to reapply to schools in Ontario. That one was definitely a bit of a waste, and we can talk about that later, but I reopened another OMSAS application and started working on that in the fall of 2017. And on October 3rd, 2017, I submitted OMSAS application number 2 to the same schools, and I also then would have later that month taken the CASPER test. Again, I did not need to rewrite my MCAT because that was already a valid score for another calendar year. And then fall of 2017, winter of 2017 continued. I was doing my Masters of Public Health and I was working and life was pretty good. And then January of 2018, rejection round number 2. This one didn't come as much of a surprise. Like I said, I do look at my second round of applications as kind of a waste of money, and I'm very privileged that I was able to do that because after submitting, I had started to reach out to admissions officers at a couple of the schools and ask if my master's, which my grades were a lot better, actually would it make a difference. And most of the replies were that yes, completing a master's, although a course-based master's was up in the air if it would count, would add sort of a bonus to the application, but it would not change your GPA score. And really, realistically, when you get invited for interview, it's most often based off of the statistics of your GPA and your MCAT score. So none of those rejections were very surprising. In January of 2018, that is also when I opened the second application through OzTREKK, which is the one that I ended up following completely through. And my first application through OzTREKK was to the University of Queensland, and that was submitted by OzTREKK for me on the 13th of January 2018. And then more were submitted as they came opening. Nani? They became open throughout the early months of 2018. And in May of 2018, I was in South Africa and Namibia with my Masters of Public Health placement, and that was an amazing experience, which actually kind of pivoted my decision-making in which school I preferred in Australia. Throughout all of early 2018, I was going to OzTREKK fairs and attending OzTREKK webinars to learn more about the schools, and I had kind of decided I had a few top favorites, but my exposure to global health really influenced my choice of MACQUARIE, which you can see in a few of my other videos. I came home from Namibia and immediately started working back at a job at my undergrad institution, helping plan the orientation for that year, so it was definitely a busy summer and fall. And on June 9th, 2018, I had my first official acceptance to medical school. And it was the University of Queensland. At that time they were doing rolling admissions, so really I knew my application would have been at the top of the pile, and I knew I met the minimums for international students, so I wasn't that surprised. but it was still very exciting. It meant I was officially going to med school, and it meant that I was really possibly going to Australia. That's a big shift. By the 23rd of June, my confirmation of enrollment was confirmed, was in my hand, so I had paid a deposit to the University of Queensland, and we'll talk about that later. And I had started the whole journey in applying for a loan to be able to finance all of this education and living here in an expensive city. And my app to Macquarie had been sent off, along with a few of the other applications to other schools in Australia. During July and early August, I received invitation to interview with the University of Sydney. I was actually a second round interview invitation, so it probably would have come earlier in July for other people. Macquarie, Griffith, and Monash. Now, Monash initially invited to interview me in Vancouver. I'm not from Vancouver, so that was a bit tricky. I emailed them back, and when a spot became available, they opened one up for me in Toronto. Then, in a span of a week, I interviewed at Macquarie first, then Griffith, and UCID received my Macquarie offer, and the next week received offer from both UCID and Griffith. It was a whirlwind, and very exciting, but also very peak planning stress in my job, so it was a lot going on at once. Once I received my offer to Macquarie, I took back my interview spot from Monash, so I hope someone else was given that chance, and I hope they were successful. I'll never know who you are, but congratulations. And by the 18th of August 2018, I had my confirmation of enrollment to the Macquarie MD program starting in 2019. And yes, this means, if you're following along in the timeline, I had 2 seats at 2 different medical schools in opposite ends of Australia. That's not allowed and that's not possible. But before I could take back my offer from the University of Queensland and receive any sort of rebate back for that fee, I had to prove that I was enrolled somewhere else. So I had to sit with 2 for a little bit, and that was quite expensive. You have to give a deposit when you accept your enrollment, and thankfully, because I was working, I had saved some, and my mom had some space in her finances. I was able to accept the Macquarie and then get my money back from the University of Queensland. Now, you don't get all of your money back, so again, very lucky, very privileged that that was okay, and something I was willing to accept. But I got most of it back. Statistically, it's most, it's not that much. Then gave up my seat at the University of Queensland and was only sitting in Macquarie, still fighting back and forth, trying to make sure that I could get financed. That is a whole other journey in itself, and I can answer questions about how to finance medical school in another video if you would like. In October of 2018, I graduated with my Master's of Public Health, and eventually in the fall and the winter, I finished my job as well. And on January 29th, 2019, I flew from Toronto to Sydney with all of those connecting flights and that really long journey for the first time to go to med school. And I officially started my MD on February 18th of 2019. So that is my little bit winding, kind of long, journey into how I became a first-generation, non-traditional, international medical student studying at Macquarie University in Sydney. Looking back, facing those rejections definitely was not fun, and it definitely kind of put me in a bit of a dark place with my own acceptance of self-worth and academic worth. But looking back on the journey, I don't think I would have changed it. There's some decisions I would have done differently, but it got me to where I am with all of the life lessons along the way, so it's easy now looking back to think it was all worth it. So if you like this video, make sure you let me know by giving it an actual like. Subscribe if you want to see more. I make videos all about med school, my life in med school, my journey to, journey through, all of that jazz. If you have any questions or I didn't answer anything, make sure you comment it down below and I can try to help out. And I will see you in the next one.